With regards to getting a diagnosis for autism and demand avoidance, or PDA, for me personally, my daughter, I had to keep going back to the doctors and just pressing regarding the fact that I felt something wasn't quite right. Her behaviour was out of hand. The doctor wasn't too helpful. They were very dismissive of me getting anywhere with CAMHS. I self-applied or self-referred to CAMHS myself. I didn't realise straight away that I could do this. You tend to get led to believe that the school or some other party needs to apply or get the referral for CAMHS, but actually you can do it as the parent yourself, which is what I did. I didn't have the school's backing, and when I say I didn't have the backing of the school, I mean the school hadn't seen or didn't feel there was an issue, and hadn't seen the behaviours that I had seen or the difficulties. Although later on through the process I did find out that the ALSA support lady, so the pastoral care lady, who was doing one-to-one with Gracie at my request, had noticed several things like autism type traits, obsessive behaviour, OCD, that type of stuff. But this was never it never came up with myself. It was the information was never fed back to me personally, or me and my husband as our parents. Therefore, that wasn't really very helpful. So when I found this out, obviously, it sort of enlightened me a bit. But as a whole, the school betrayed. Their opinion was very much of. It was felt that it was suggested or implied that it was a parenting issue, and it was kind of said that once we gave Gracie choices, like of whether to come into school or not, that then she started not coming in. As it happens, we'd had a year of very volatile, violent behaviour with physical, mental abuse at home with me and my husband. Obviously, I got more of the abuse because I'm her full-time carer. But equally, we both get the same. It's not directed mainly at me or my husband. It's either or. So basically, the violence started as she went into juniors after years of difficult behaviour. So that was what led us to get the diagnosis. Now, CAMHS, when we had our first visit to CAMHS, it was without Gracie, and I asked if I needed to bring her, and they said it doesn't matter if you do or you don't, it's entirely up to you. So we went on our own, and it was around 2 hours, and we went through the whole history with Gracie from birth, etc. The woman who we spoke to was very confident that it wasn't a parenting issue. She brought up PDA and said, had we heard of it? We had said, no, we don't recall hearing of it, although I do remember now vaguely reading something regarding it, but it wasn't obviously at the forefront of my mind. So we went back and looked at it. They said they wouldn't diagnose it because they didn't diagnose it in CAMHS, but they suggested I look into it because it sounded like we'd exhausted all other avenues. So we went back and had a look at it, and it was like a moment of, like a light bulb moment, like people say. It was like, this is our daughter. It's like it's written for her. The only thing that was a little bit not so sure of on the sort of main symptoms or how they portray the PDA traits as such, the traits, was the passive, not the passive early history, the bit about, I think it might have been the passive early history, actually, sorry. I think it was that one, or something about that, but apparently that's the least recognised trait, or the least, they now believe that is not that's not really relevant, as much as the other ones are. Now, everything else there, the avoidance to extreme extent and all of that, that was definitely my daughter. As I say, I'd had years of people saying, well, all children don't do what you want them to do. And I'd say, yes, but this is like, no matter what you do, no matter how consistent you are, you have boundaries, but they mean nothing. You say, you know, it was a case of if you took everything from her room, it would be so. If you was to smack her, it would be that didn't hurt. So, I mean, very early on, that's not something we bothered doing, because we're trying to stop the violent side and show her by modelling that violence isn't the way to get things. Obviously, her violence is anxiety and frustration, and a form of communication. She kind of goes into a red mist, and then she hits out, kicks out, whatever. So basically, on the diagnosis side, we were lucky enough to have family members that funded a private diagnosis, as we were, despite to and fro and getting no help from the school and no help from CAMS, really. It was very much, you know, we were very much led to believe it was a parenting issue, even though they told us on the contrary in our visit one-to-one with them. Therefore, I then explored the Elizabeth Newson Centre, which I knew PDA was going to be the best way to get PDA diagnosis, etc. They were taking bookings 8-9 months in advance, so they were really snowed under and said it would be some time. So therefore they suggested the Lorna Wing Centre for Autism in Bromley in Kent. I'd also heard of them be mentioned quite a lot through different various forums, so therefore I followed it through with the Lorna Wing Centre. At the Lorna Wing Centre, we had a day's assessment where 2 doctor psychologists would, a combination of interviewing Gracie, interviewing us as her parents. Well, we were in separate rooms most of the time. Then it was obviously, so it was clinical history, etc. Then it was also based on some different tests they did, observations they did, and they tended, from what I gather, they sort of got Gracie sort of built up a sort of confidence and stuff, or a rapport with her as such. And then as the afternoon went on, they gradually put in some different opinions and demands as such, or differences of opinion, and Gracie started to show rigid thinking patterns. She couldn't see things from other people's side. She wasn't processing things. So, I mean, they were both unanimously, they said, we're both, you know, unanimously come to the decision that Gracie has autism spectrum disorder, which is now said, as opposed to saying autism, it's now said as autism spectrum, because it is a spectrum, and the umbrella is obviously autism, but the actual profile that best fitted Gracie was pathological demand avoidance. Now, pathological demand avoidance is there's a lot of controversy with it. You almost get the non-believers. Therefore, because it is still, even though it was 1980s that it was first come to light, it's still very early in its research, or as early in its recognition, shall I say. Therefore, it takes time. We are, you know, even in the last 5 years, there's been lots and lots of breakthroughs with PDA and getting more recognition with professional staff. But it's not in the diagnostic manual, the medical manual. So therefore, it's not in there. It's almost like we can't do something. We can't diagnose something that is not in the manual. And as we know, it's not all. Nothing fits into a box. Especially autism, it's a spectrum. Therefore, you can't say, well, this person looks you in the eye and is very bright, therefore they can't be autistic. But that is still very much the stereotype you have out there across the board with people and professionals, is that, oh, but she looks you in the eye, she can't have autism, or she's not behind at school, therefore she can't be autistic. And this is the problem. You're up against that, and you know, you can be easily put off by this. Luckily, you know, I'm not the sort of person that does that. I am very determined if I'm in the right mindset myself, and I basically just pushed and pushed and pushed. As I say, the Lorna Wing diagnosis helped massively. You don't need a diagnosis to apply for an EHCP, but without the school's backing, which I didn't have because they were still portraying there wasn't an issue, that it was very difficult. And even now it affects me, you know, how difficult it was, because even now you're still having to kind of back up things despite having a full diagnosis and everything. A diagnosis is not a window to getting all the help. It's just an extra aid to try and achieve that. But don't think that once you get a diagnosis, that's it, everything's fine. You know, it takes a lot of getting used to. You know, I went through, really, I'm still sort of coming out of the other side in the last year of going through like the grieving stage where you almost feel like you need to grieve for the child that isn't. It might sound hard to hear for some people, but of course I love my daughter with all my heart, but at the same time, it's not what you imagine life was going to be. You know, you picture, oh, is she going to be a dancer? Is she going to be a singer? I wonder if she'll get married and have 3 children, or if she'll have children, or what sort of man she's going to marry, and stuff like that. And then suddenly you're left with, all you think is, I want my daughter or child to be able to cope with life, cope with everyday life. Everything else is a bonus. If she can function, if she can leave the house and she can wash herself, hold down a job, that it would be a massive, massive thing. That would be, you know, to have that would mean more to me than anything else. One thing I've always said throughout is, it doesn't matter how many qualifications you have, how bright you are, if you cannot leave the house because you're so scared of the world and the environment you live in, and the social interaction and sensory issues that involves by leaving the house, then it doesn't matter how bright you are. So, you know, really, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is, if you're a mother, a carer, a husband, or even an adult who thinks you have PDA, or something's not right, something doesn't fit, don't let it lie. Keep pushing, keep going. Obviously, I'm fortunate. Some people aren't fortunate that they cannot find the money or have not got the option of parents paying for a diagnosis, and I understand that. But all I can suggest in those cases is that you keep going, you keep speaking to the school, you keep badgering CAMS. I used to ring them, at one point I was ringing them every day, and to the point where they said, oh, hello, Mrs. Harriman Dyer, because they knew who I was just from my voice. And to be honest, you're not in it to make friends, you're in it to be the advocate for your child. And if that means you've got to become a pain in the bum, then that's what you need to do.